So here we're going to take it on another step. So we started out with just working absolute value and simplifying that. So here they're giving us a comparison. So in the problems that I have here, this yellow box is where they want us to put a comparison symbol. The comparison symbols that we'll be using today are greater than, less than, and equal to. The key thing is when you are comparing numbers that involve absolute value, you must simplify the absolute value first before you can go through and compare the numbers. So here, I have an absolute value of -2, and they want me to compare that to an answer of -1. This one does not have an absolute value symbol on it, so we're not going to change that. We just need to simplify this absolute value before we can decide whether it's greater than, less than, or equal to. So the absolute value of -2, well, -2 would be 2 places away from 0, compared to -1. So now I'm pretty comfortable with working a positive compared to a negative because I know that positive numbers are always larger. So for those of you that get confused with these symbols, don't worry about whether or not you can read them. I lots of times like to think of it as like an alligator mouth, and the bigger mouth eats the bigger number, or the bigger mouth. The open mouth eats the bigger number. So open mouth eats the bigger number. Now I can read this as 2 is greater than -1. So take note, we had to simplify here on the -2 first. Let's try another one. The absolute value of -7 compared to 6. First step, we need to solve the absolute value of -7. Well, -7 would be 7 places away from 0, compared to this 6 does not have an absolute value, so we're just going to keep it as a 6. It doesn't have the absolute value bars. Now when I go through to compare that, 7 is bigger, so the open mouth eats the bigger number. 7 is greater than 6. Or if I were to read it, the absolute value of -7 is greater than +6. Why don't you go ahead and try this one on your own? The absolute value of 10 compared to 11. When you did this one, you had to start here by simplifying. So if I simplify the absolute value of 10, well, that would be 10 places away from 0, compared to 11. Now I can compare those two numbers. So 11's the bigger number. Open mouth eats the bigger number. So really, this is what it would look like. The absolute value of 10 is less than 11. Let's try one more. The absolute value of 9 compared to -9. We're going to go ahead and start simplifying with the absolute value. So the absolute value of 9. 9 is absolutely 9 places away from 0, compared to -9. So now when I go through and I look at this, 9 is bigger. Open mouth eats the larger number. So here, the absolute value of 9 is greater than -9. Let's try a real world problem. The summit elevation of a volcano is the elevation of the top of the volcano relative to sea level. The summit elevation of the volcano Kilauea in Hawaii is 1,277 meters. The summit elevation of the of the underwater volcano Loa in the Pacific Ocean is negative 969 meters. Which summit is closer to sea level? So here we kind of have to think of sea level in terms of that's that zero mark. So if you were to think of sea level as the zero mark, the question is asking which of those numbers is closer to zero. So if we're just comparing integers, which of those numbers is closer to zero? So really the absolute value of them. So if I had the numbers, well, 1277 or 1277, the absolute value of that is still going to be the same thing, 1277. Because they don't want us to compare the negative to the positive number. They want to know which of these two numbers is closer to zero, closer to that sea level mark. Okay, so now I want to figure out the absolute value of negative 969, the absolute value of that. Well, that would be 969 meters. So now when we think of zero, which of these two is closest to zero on the number line? We're not going to compare these numbers. We're comparing the absolute value of those. So if you were to put these in order, with zero being one of the three numbers, which of these two numbers would fall closest to zero on the number line? Your 969. So to answer the question, which summit is closer to sea level? Well, it's the one in the Pacific Ocean. So this would be our correct answer. That's just using real world problems and absolute value.